Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. Tonight, we're really fortunate to have a special guest with us, the driver of the number 9 NOS Energy Drink World of Outlaw late model driver, Nick Hoffman. Nice to see you, Nick.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to be on here, and I've watched quite a few episodes myself, so pretty cool to be on this side of the camera.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you. Little information that I looked up today that said you started your racing career at age 14 in a modified. 5 years later, in 2012, at the age of 19, you became a businessman building your own elite modified chassis with huge success. That's pretty cool by the age of 19.
Yeah. I started my actual racing career super early, like at 4 years old. But by the time
Oh,
I had moved to North Carolina, I was 10 and really ran out of options of dirt racing down here, So when I was 10, 11, 12 range, I was racing a lot of asphalt racing, Bandoleros and legend cars and stuff like that until dad finally moved me into like a dirt sportsman. Then I started racing modifieds when I was 14. And I raced modifieds from 14 till basically now. But I was very fortunate to start winning some races when I was 17, 18 range. And I just got out of high school and trying to figure out what I was going to do for a living. And dad told me, I was going to have to figure it out on my own. And he was an engine builder. Really had nothing to do with the engine side. I didn't really care for it. And I was more interested in trying to make a race car fast. So the only reason why I even started a chassis company was because Monty Grice, who was building my cars at the time, owned Freedom Chassis. And he got diagnosed with cancer, and it looked like he wasn't going to be able to make it, and unfortunately he passed away on us. But he was at least able to be around for my first car to get built and watch me win at Eldora. So that was really special for me. And I was 19 years old. I took off and tried to be a businessman, and I was starting to get money in for deposits on cars pretty quick. And a kid gets $20,000 deposit, and you got to figure it out pretty quick. How we're going to make this deal happen. So been
yeah.
fortunate. It's worked out to this point.
And then, to my estimation, if I read this correctly, you've won 7 UMP national championships in the Fox number 2, along with many other events, including 24 Gators at Volusia Speedway in Florida. Then, to start off, you backed it up this year in your late model car, winning another Gator, making a total of 25 Gators. Is
Yeah.
that fact?
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate at Volusia. I've won a lot of races. Nobody's won more Gators than I have. But yeah, I got 2 late model Gators now, one last year, one this year, which are probably my most prized possessions. My first one in 2012 was a kind of a milestone and kind of pushed me my career to be an actual race car driver. And then my last 2 here is in a late model is, very hard to come by. And I'm probably pretty proud of those 3. Would be my most proudest moments at Volusia. Was my first one, and then the last 2.
Sure. Well, that sounds pretty cool. And of course, that's not all. You ran 4 NASCAR Camping World Truck Series races, and then Then you have ran some Chili Bowl events also. So you've pretty much driven about everything.
Yeah, I try to get my feet wet in about anything I can. And yeah, I've raced quite a few truck races there, 4 races. I was able to run top 10 at Eldora, which was cool. But the asphalt side, I just subpar. It was about a 20th place finish was about the best I could run. But I enjoyed it. It was a deal that helped Mike Mittler out and get him running some more races. And he helped me out a lot in my career. So it was really cool to be a part of that. But Chili Bowl, I feel like for any race fan, it's an event that everybody needs to see at least once in their life. It's I feel like those are 2 bucket list deals: is Chili Bowl and Gateway Dirt Nationals. They kind of are very similar in a way, but also very different. Those are 2 places I feel like any race fan needs to get to.
You bet. So then on Thursday, May 1st, you turned 32. So you've accomplished all of this in a short period of time. How'd you do all that?
Yeah, I feel like I worked pretty hard, but just very fortunate with the people around me. Pushed myself pretty hard. Carl Edwards was a mentor of mine, and he's always, had that never give up attitude that, no matter what you want to do in life, whether it's to be a baseball player, a race car driver, or a doctor, as long as you put your head down and keep digging, you'll be able to make it happen. So that's kind of how I've lived my life, and been very fortunate with the people around me to give me opportunities, and everything's worked out. So still not done. I feel like I got a lot of years left ahead of me, and there's still a lot of milestones I need to pass.
Well, Schrader's going to turn 70 this year, and he's still racing a modified.
Yeah, still getting it done too. That's the biggest.
And he's still getting it done. Yeah, no doubt. So you got a long way to go, bud. Anyway, so then this weekend you go to Mississippi Thunder in Fountain City, Wisconsin, to do the Dairy Showdown for the Dairyland Showdown for the World Outlaw deal. So that sounds pretty exciting. And I looked at your schedule, and you've got quite a few shows. Do you run the modified much anymore?
No, and really, mainly it's just my fault. I'm not really caring to as much as I used to. I got to the point where I did what I wanted to do in my modified career, and this was my next goal and my next step. And so I've kind of focused 100% on that. My chassis business is still going really strong. I got guys winning all across the country, so I haven't really had to get myself back into a modified to sell cars, So I'll run one or two races. I've been fortunate the last 2 years. I've ran one race each year, and they've both been 10,000 win races, and I've won both of them. So my modified career has been short the last 2 years, but Mississippi Thunder this week, one of my favorite racetracks I get to go to, one of the best ones on our schedule, and I was able to win there last year. So this year, paying $75,000 to win, we're definitely working a little bit harder to make sure we have our ducks in a row and have a pretty good shot at it this week.
Awesome. Well, until we get some questions on here, I've got a technical question. Jake McBurney drives my house car, and this year we went to the brake floater underneath. And for some reason, it seems like when he gets in trouble, or like say somebody spins in front of him, or if somebody gets a little out of shape in front of him, and he has to get on the brakes real hard to keep himself out of trouble, he ends up spinning the car out. He said the car, he said it feels like it's got side bite, and then it just all of a sudden comes around. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So in my modified days, I never messed with that. Wasn't even a thing at that time. I feel like it's really came around in probably the last year or two. And a guy like Tyler Nicely would be one of my premier drivers on my side. He's ran it a little bit, and everything that I've seen is it's more aggressive. But as far as getting yourself in trouble, I've always said that the modifieds are so much different than late model racing because of that brake floater. And you can change how the car drives a lot by what you do with your feet, more than in a modified than you can a late model. So the brake floater underneath, I can't really give you a time or situation where I've noticed one way or the other than in our world of just running it on top, that more angle is more aggressive. So obviously if it's underneath, it's even more. So for me, I probably ain't much help on that side.
Okay. I didn't know if you had any experience with that or whatever. Cody says the new mold looks good, Chad. And Jason, IMCA A-Mod.
Yeah, I brought one with.
Awesome. Check
Right
that baby out. That thing is nice.
25 pounds.
Jason, an IMCA modified open motor, what's a go-to adjustment for forward drive? Well, with that IMCA tire, you're somewhat limited. With an open motor, that's more of a struggle. If the racetrack's good, you can still get some pretty decent bite, but when it gets really slick, man, it's really tough. The problem with the open motor is you don't get to run the spoiler. What would your suggestions be?
Yeah, if you want to know what I would tell my guys, I'm pretty straightforward with a lot of my guys, and that is the number one question you'll get as a chassis builder is what can I do to get more forward drive, like every single week. And the first thing I'll tell them is let off the damn gas, because 90% of these guys just throttle on that thing, and that's their biggest problem. And so many guys kind of miss. I feel like their car might be loose on entry and they screw their entry up, which kills their center. Then they have no traction. It's like there's so many pieces of that corner it takes to figure out before there's no magic of be like, all right, this is what you're going to do to just give you more forward drive. There's so many pieces to that. And I get that question a million times, and it could be as small as, a bar change or a load change, or, I'm very big on the aero side, like what you can do to that body to make more grip, whether it's side force or down force. Obviously, if you ain't got a spoiler versus a crate car having a spoiler, it's just, you're shooting yourself in the foot there. You're not going to overcome that spoiler.
Yeah, it's very difficult, even though it's not much of a spoiler, that quarter entry being tight getting in, just like you said, it starts at the beginning of the corner. And if corner entry is not right, you're pretty much screwed the whole corner around.
And we wind tunneled a car. Man, it's been 10 years ago now that when UMP got rid of the spoilers, we had a 5-inch blade. They got rid of the spoilers. So we went straight to the wind tunnel and tunnel tested a car and found out a 5-inch blade on a modified. I think the most yaw we can do in there is like 8 degrees in the tunnel. So a 5-inch blade was over 350 pounds of downforce. So it's massive. The modified only makes, I think it was like 900 pounds of actual downforce to begin with. So you lost over a third.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. James, brake floater underneath is probably trying to pick the tire off the ground and you're on the brake floater too hard. Work good to keep nose in ground riding, but not going to like that hard braking. Well, that's a good. I mean, that's a good point. Like I said, that we're just kind of going through things that have happened this year and the changes that we made this year, and trying to come up with some sort of idea of what we're doing that's not quite right. Because he's not normally one that can spin out. I mean, he usually could get it a little free and still save it, but once it's half gone, it's gone. Alan, I see you ran coilover behind on the left rear, but got push right away. Need different shock or different setup, like how much traction it got off the corner.
So I'm a big believer in the coilover behind is more grip than splitting them up. I think that's what he's trying to say there is like the coilover behind probably had a little bit more grip, which made them tighter. And yeah, it could come down to stiffer on shock will help you rotate a little bit more, or just I'm in a situation like that. Like if I'm tight, I would a lot of times make a roll steer adjustment. But yeah, there is definitely a difference there between split or coilover behind. If the track is rough, we go split. If it's smooth and slick and we're looking for grip, we go coilover behind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The only thing is the driver's really got to be on his game with the coilover behind, because corner entry can be a little iffy depending on how he gets into the corner. With them split, it's a little more stable on corner entry.
Yeah, I deal with this a lot with if you say an older school race car driver, say I'll throw Kenny Wallace right under the bus on this, because he'll tell you straight to your face that he just struggles with the gas and brake, or being easy with just letting off the gas. He'll dump the throttle and try and pick it up hard, and he struggles with the coilover behind, and we have to run a stiffer shock or a stiffer spring to keep the car held up for him, because if not, he'll dump the gas and get loose. So it just depends on how well you are with throttle management or using the brake at the same time.
Yeah, that trail braking thing and keeping the car loaded. Jeff, USRA stock car question. What would be the impact of increasing both rear spring heights by 4 inches? Example, going to a 16-inch left rear and an 11-inch right rear to a 20-inch left rear and a 15-inch right rear. Would the car feel or behave any differently? It's going to change the spring table a little bit, but I don't know. other than the fact that that 20-inch spring, I don't know. I always felt that the 20-inch spring sometimes had too many coils and would kind of make the car. Um, the spring wouldn't always. You went softer, but the spring wouldn't always maintain its integrity like if it was a little shorter spring. What's you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, that tall 20 inches, it's a lot of spring, and if you're going to be softer, it's going to bow. You know, when you're trying to load that tall spring like that, just like you said, you're going to get a lot of spring bow, especially in a stock car where you're on a coil on a screw jack style car. So that's, I think, the biggest problem with going to them. The spring table is just going to raise the spring table possibly evenly, so really not going to change how much it rolls over.
I've always been a guy that I don't care what height that spring is. The car doesn't know any different as long as the rate's the same until you start getting close to coil bind. If it's too short and it's getting close to touching those coils, then it starts to get progressive. But I've always felt like it didn't matter if you ran a 13 or an 11-inch spring in your right rear. As long as your load's the same and your spring rate's the same, the car ain't going to really know any different.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Justin wants to know if you've got AC in that shop yet.
Yeah, so Justin, his car owner would be Craig Christian, which is my heat and AC guy, and he's been dropping the ball on me and getting me some AC, and it's getting pretty hot down here in the south. So I came up here to my bar, also known as the Bluetooth Tavern, which we're fully furnished here. So yeah, I had to get on him. It almost comes down to when his car needs more parts, he's gonna have to get me some AC.
I see. Yeah, there we go. Wilson, car won't transfer the weight as much on the right rear if it is the same weight.
I think he's answering the other guy's question.
I think that's probably
He's talking about
springs. Travis, right rear G60 always runs hotter than the left rear. How close do you like to see the rear tire temperatures, and what adjustments would you do with the hot tire on the right rear? Well, of course, I've always had the old adage of feed the heat. If the tire is really hot, that means it's spinning and sliding. And so that means you need to put traction to that wheel. A lot of people don't believe that because they figure, if the right rear is really hot, why would I put traction to that tire? Well, actually, the problem is the left rear is overworking, but the right rear is not doing anything. So it's not getting you any traction or whatever. What's your opinion, Nick?
Yeah, same deal. I've always been that guy of like if one tire is way hotter than the other, that's the one that needs work. But 9 times out of 10, your right rear is going to be hotter than your left rear either way. But yeah, I'm the same. I'm on board with you. If one is way hotter than the other, that's the corner you need to work on.
What kind of temperature spread do you like to see?
Like this weekend, I think we had a 30 temp or 30 Fahrenheit different from right rear to left rear, like at Talladega last week. But we were pretty aggressive on both sides of wear. And also, I probably wasn't giving you very accurate readings either because there was a lot of water down at the bottom of the racetrack. And I'd make sure I drug my left rear through like that mud or that water every once in a while to make sure I cooled it back down. So it's hard to get 100% accurate readings versus like an asphalt car, but there's a lot you can do on the racetrack to to cool a tire down or avoid that.
But 30 degrees sounds, that's kind of what, we always looked at, that if we could be 30 degrees or slightly under, that that car's working pretty well. IMCA Sport Mod, Travis said. Connor, pros and cons of extending upper or lower ball joints on the right front or left front. Man, that gets into a whole roll center deal, and holy moly. You want to talk about opening up a can of worms. Wow.
There's too many answers to that question, and I don't know if there's a pro or a con depending on what you got.
Yeah, I think it just all depends on what you're trying to accomplish there. Because you're going to move the roll center right to left depending on which ball joint you change. You're going to move it up or down depending on which ball joint you change. and you're going to change A-frame angles. I mean, it just changes so much stuff that, yeah, I wished we could give you a simple answer, but there isn't one. It would take more than the length of the show to explain all that. Brad, when talking about spring table, how much are you looking for front and rear of an IMCA Sport Mod?
I think that's a question for Chad because he's the spring table guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 inches tends to be kind of the best spot, in my opinion. You know, the right front, usually we're running a 2.5 inch drop cup in the right front and a top bearing in the left front, so that's about 2.5 inches. We did make a mid cup for the front end. We made 1.25 inches there, so the spring table is, I think, one of the most overlooked things on the car, and we constantly get calls about it every day here. But tuning that and working with that and being able to get the car to mechanically roll, on its own, and then, if you get more roll naturally from the spring table, you can increase rate of that spring and drive the tire into the track. So I like to see 2 inches in the back and that 2.5 in the front, just to make sure the car is getting into motion.
Man, we focused on that spring table back in the day. I mean, that's something that's been around for a long, long time. Biggest problem is so many people missed it. So many people didn't pay any attention to it, and it's really a fine tuning, critical deal that makes a big difference in how the car actually functions.
I happen to have these two new spring cups for spring table for spring separate stuff. It seems like you could never have the right drop because you have different spring rates, and with the soft left rear wound up, now we got this one that has no cup. The screw jack just goes right to the top of it, and then this is an extreme drop, so that's a 2.5 inch difference swing there. So I mean, we just keep coming up with different cup options to keep playing with that, and it's very important, and there's definitely gains to be had there.
Let's see. Jerry Van Sickle, our good buddy announcer here at the Boone Speedway and
I don't know
promoter
if I'd
of
call him a good
Marshalltown.
buddy. That'd be pretty scary.
Yeah. Anyway, he wants to know if he can find you a car if you come out and run the Harris Clash June 24th.
Man, that is like the busiest time of our year, for one. Anytime May, June, July. Two, I have zero experience running any IMCA stuff. Never, to be honest, never really cared to because I focus on my UMP side. And three, like, if I'm going to drive a modified, I'm going to drive one of my own.
Are there any IMCA cars? I know who had one a couple years ago.
Yeah, there was one in like New York, and then there's been a couple that dabble out that way just a little bit. Like Rich Michael will take one out there and run like Boone Super Nationals, but
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, but very little. And I tell people that call me if they want a USMTS car, a Wasota car, IMCA, whatever. Like I don't build that stuff, and I don't really want to. Like I'm focused on the UMP side. That's what I'm good at, and so yeah, I don't even dabble into that market.
Tony wants to know your thoughts on the new late model tire.
Yeah, so this week was my first week racing on it. And they're allowing us to run the old 3 and 4 or the new 3 and 4. And I'm telling you, it came down to the last seconds of like figuring out which one I was going to bolt on for the feature for the 100 lapper. Not having any experience on the tire, I was kind of nervous too. And I actually had the old 4 on the car, and like we were getting ready. They'd already blew the 10-minute horn. And I was like, screw it, let's go with the new one. Just we need to get laps on it. And it actually wore really nice. I probably could have got a little bit more aggressive with my cuts because I was a little worried with these tires are fresh. We were worried that, we might see some blistering or delamination or something because they're so fresh from the factory. But it actually wore really nice. So I know Bobby Pierce has done a lot of testing as far as I think they tested it maybe 34. I don't remember which track it was last week, but they were testing back and forth. And when he won Saturday night, I think that was kind of your nod that this tire is probably better. If he tested both of them back to back, there's a reason why he chose that new tire. So I feel like so far it's been okay with what they gave us. We didn't need every single block drilled like what we got. If they were going to drill some blocks, they could have just did the blister blocks and we'd be fine with that. But I don't know. They gave us a bunch of holes that we don't need.
Awesome. Marcus, on the IMCA modified, does mounting the right rear coil over upside down versus right side up affect spring table? No. It's all about where it's mounted to the chassis and where it's mounted to the rear end. Doesn't matter which way it's up.
Yep.
Nick, any experience with a +2 right front lower on a Chevelle front clip modified? My car already has a 1 inch and and I want more camber without changing the shock clearance because it's already close. Uh, you know, you, I'm going to have Nick answer that one
Yeah.
because in our world we can't mess with those A-frames.
So we can run a +1. Chad's my A-frame manufacturer, so he'll tell you that I do not run a +1. All my stuff is stock length, which is, I guess, surprising to a lot of people that I don't take that extra inch on the lower. But a lot of guys would probably take the extra inch. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like +2 is getting pretty aggressive out there. And then, it's changing more than just your camber, right? Like we go back to roll centers and then where your shock's located and angles on shocks and angles on springs, depending on where the spring ends up in the bucket. And then you got a leverage point. There's just so many things that changes. If you're going for just more camber, just, shorten the upper A-frame is going to be easier.
Yeah, I think that the +1 right front lower is making cars tight nonstop that don't need to be tight. You put the right front tire outside of the right rear tire, it's instantly tight. It's like putting a deeper offset wheel on the right rear does the same thing. And, a +2, I can't even imagine how tight that car would be with that thing on there.
Yeah. Yeah. What you would be trying to accomplish would actually hurt you more than help you. Wilson, what are your thoughts about using an 8.2 shock with gas pressure on the right rear in a stock car? Um, well, an 8.2, which I'm assuming you're talking about 8 compression, 2 rebound with gas pressure on the right rear. I'm afraid that might be too stiff, might be too slow to react. Not let the car get on the right rear as quick as you want. Those cars have a little bit of an issue with side bite and weight transfer the way they are. Most everybody complains about the lack of side bite in those cars. I would probably, I wouldn't go so much as saying the other way around, but, a 3.6 or something like that would be, in my opinion, better for traction because it's going to let the car get on the right rear a little bit easier, get that tire in the ground, and then the 6 is going to hold it down so that it doesn't come up quite so quick to get you up off the corner a little bit better. Tony, has there been any negatives about the tire yet?
I would say no, not yet that I've seen. We're still messing with a lot of kind of research and development on it. It's a rib sidewall, so it's supposed to make more side bite. It's more, the sidewall is more stood up. So I'm waiting on Chad to get me a tire rating machine done so I can test sidewalls and figure out how much different this tire actually is than what we were running. So as far as for me, 100 laps at Talladega, I feel like that place can get pretty hard on tires, and it wasn't too bad this week.
The engineers actually just approved the frame today, so we're closer to a machine than we're ever going to be. So we're excited. We got that thing pretty much designed. I know I wanted to get it to you when you were up here on your trip, but we ain't going to quite make it. But I'm pretty sure we're going to have them babies the end of May. We're going to be pretty close on them, so pretty excited about it.
All right, then you can bring mine to
Harris Clash.
No problem.
Right on.
Jack wants to know, Chad, I have a B-Mod. Do those spring cups work on Speedway Motors spring slider?
Well, these cups are like for screw jacks, not for a slider. And a slider, if you're using a slider on a B mod like a Wasota B mod, then the spring table goes back to like an A mod where it's hooked to the chassis. So then your spring table would be where that is. So there'd be no change in changing them cup locations at all. So if you're running a slider, then it is what it is there.
Yeah, it's all
You got your whole
location on the
inventory in
chassis.
front of you?
Huh?
You got your whole inventory sitting in front of you?
No. No, they just set the new stuff here. When we release products, they put it on the Bob and Chad table so that I talk about it. So, and the spring table prints have been here for years.
You have a drop shock mount piece that would help his spring table if you wanted to drop it.
Yeah,
Right.
so if you to do it on a coilover on the car like that, this one here has screw jacks built into it, but if it's fabricated, then you would bolt in that shock drop right there to lower the spring table is how you would do it on a coilover style. And we make all kinds of different clamp-on mounts and bolt-in mounts, and the spring table is something we probably have 50 or 60 part numbers that are just involved with changing the location of the spring height in the car.
Justin, I was running a 13-inch 225 right rear spring and went to a 12-inch 225, and the car wouldn't roll on the right rear at all. Just skated, no drive, or on a sport mod. Why would that be? Acting like more like a 250 because it was shorter.
Well, you lowered the spring table an inch, so you made more roll, but you overpowered the spring rate, which made the car slide. So if you're going to make a spring, that's one of the things you have to understand is if we're going to make that spring table adjustment and induce roll, you need to most of the time increase rate to handle the more roll in the motion. So I wouldn't, if I was going to put a shorter spring in, I probably would have went to a 250.
But he says that it didn't roll at all.
Yeah, it has to be a situation where you end up with too much load or something. That's a pretty broad question too, like as far as
Or the short spring was acting like a tight helix. That could be
Well,
too.
that's the only thing I could think of, something to that effect. It doesn't make any sense. It should have actually rolled more with the shorter spring in there because you did change the spring table. So I'm not really sure what the issue was there. Something else had to have went on at the same time. Dustin says it loads too quick. Josh, could you explain how a bushing chain limiter on the left rear could help and what settings to start with? I don't
yeah. So in a late model world, now we have to run that 1-inch puck. We have no choice. The modified world, I've been everywhere from bump springs when those were legal to all kinds of different mixtures of rubbers, stacking rubbers on top of each other. You can learn a lot by going to RE's website, and they have a chart on basically the rate of whichever color rubber that you're running, or if you stack them on top of each other, and then you go from there. On late model side, I feel like the rule of thumb kind of was always right around that 700 to 900 mark as far as a 1-inch rate, so that'd be on a bump spring. But then this rule, the droop rule, and everything came out. It changed a lot as far as the late model side. The modified side, in my experience, has always needed to be stiffer than that. And a lot of that has to do with pull bar versus lift arm. So, yeah, you can take that with a grain of salt, but that's kind of what I have learned is the late model side can typically be a little bit softer than the modified side.
Now, I see some of the late model guys are experimenting now with a pull bar instead of a lift
That
arm.
was me.
That was you. Okay.
Yeah, and I never actually won a race with it, which I'm pissed off about because the very first night I ran it was Farmer City. 2 years ago and led. It was an outlaw race. I just unloaded this thing and had it all mapped out. I felt like and led the whole race until like 5 or 8 to go, and got caught up behind a lap car, and Pierce passed me. I run second, and then I ran it the next night at Granite City and battled for the lead and ended up running third. And then I ran really well with it, but I got to venturing off and trying different stuff and getting worse and worse. And I'm trying to race for an outlaw championship, so I gave up on it, So there are some guys that still run some stuff, and Rusty Schlink was always running it on his cars, but I went pretty hard at it there for a while, and I felt like I could get it pretty close, but it just wasn't enough to beat the lift arm stuff. Like the lift arm stuff was just too consistent every night.
Yeah, I can believe that. That's one of those deals where it'd take a year to figure that whole deal out, probably, and make it as consistent. But then the problem with that is you'd be making minor changes all the time, where with your lift arm stuff, there's probably not a whole lot of changes.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it was wild. If you take a standard car and just pull the lift arm out and put the pull bar in, that thing lays on the right rear, carries the left front. I mean, I look like a modified out there, it made all kinds of grip, but it was like taking so much more right rear load. Then, it'd make you tight entry because you had so much right rear load, and then you'd free on exit just to try and keep the nose back down. And, the late model side, so much of an aero platform that I was having to kind of crutch the car to just get my platform back correct. And man, it was tough to drive. But if somebody could ever figure it out, I think it'd be pretty damn good.
Wilson says last year when he tested a 10.5-inch 250, feels just like a 13-inch 225. Glad to know. Thomas, what are your pros and cons of running a Pinto spindle versus the metric spindle on the IMCA Northern Sport Mod? Well, I like the metric spindle because, of course, it's a 7-degree spindle. So, in my opinion, it has less drag in the middle of the corner. If it depends on how the car is actually operating. To me, it feels like there's more mid-corner speed because it's not trying to load and unload the left rear depending on how the driver's driving the car. Just because it's with the Pinto spindle and that 10-degree spindle, it can kind of try to load the left rear a little more. What's your opinion, Nick?
No opinion there because I have never ran a metric spindle. I don't even think I've ever owned one. So all my stuff's always been Pinto stuff. So I couldn't even tell you one way or the other. I mean, they do make that 7-degree Pinto. And I've ran it on the left front before, but I've never ran a 7-degree on my right front. Just how our stuff's set up, and it takes obviously different upper A-frame lengths and everything else too. So we built a package 10 years ago on all that stuff and never got away from it.
Yeah, it's not something that you just, if you've got Pinto spindles on your car now, you just don't bolt these on. There's more work to it. Different ball joints, different heights. It's more complex. Jason, just came into the shop. My car's been tight for a few weeks. Checked spring load in the front and found the left front somehow had 100 pounds too much load. Wouldn't that explain the tight in, loose off condition on a UMP modified?
You want to take that one, Chad?
Yeah, I would say more left front load would make the car tight in and loose off. That's exactly what it should have done.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I've always said more left front load makes you tighter on entry. It's just like if you put a solid rod in the left front, it's going to load the right rear, which gives you right rear stick on entry. But yeah, it in my world has always made me tighter on entry. As far as loose off, I guess a lot of it depends on how much it comes back off of that left front. But yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing. Definitely makes you tighter on entry.
Nick mentioned a late model laying on the right rear and flying the left front with the pull bar. Carry this over to the USRA modified. What are some of the go-to changes to help out that platform? Panhard bar heights, angles, weight, location, question mark.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to skin that cat. Right rear top rod angle, just raising it up could get the left front back down. Obviously, raising the J bar on the pinion side will help also. More right rear load helped. There's just so many things that you can do on a modified. A lot of times, like if our guys fly the nose too much, they're too stiff on the right front. A lot of people don't kind of overlook that as why the nose is flying the left front is because the right front's too stiff a lot of times too. So there's a lot of ways to skin that cat. Like I said, obviously weight location. If you move the weight left, it's not going to fly the nose as much. So, there's plenty of things you can do, but something as small as just raising that right rear top rod one hole could get that left front back down.
Yeah, that can make a big difference. You bet. And if they don't have the rear end located correctly, if the rear end's too far to the right for some reason or another, that'll definitely do it. That'll stick the car pretty hard, and that carries the left front tire too. Brian, new to the sport mods, got a used car for my daughter. I see they have right rear and left rear shocks mounted behind the rear end. Any difference on left rear if the shock's mounted in front or behind the axle?
I don't know nothing about sport mod stuff or any of that type of mechanics.
Yeah, well, like with Soda B mod, you got to have them either both in front or both behind. The sport, in fact, actually, that's kind of the way it is. Both shocks need to be mounted behind now on the sport mods. So legally, you have to put them both behind. That's just part of their rule. But traction-wise, having the shock in front with a little more aggressive compression, when the car steers, it's going to wrap the rear end. It's going to work
Whoa.
a little bit more traction up off the corner. Brock, how can you get more lateral force from the left rear to the right front on an IMCA stock car?
Man, I don't know much about that type of stuff either. But it looks like them guys run like no right front spring and do whatever they can to get their left rears up, So, and their motors are obviously heavy too. So there's a lot of things there as far as I don't know nothing about IMCA stock cars, but I'm telling you, some of the best racing you'll get to watch. I don't turn the TV off when their late models are racing out there just because I want to watch the IMCA stock cars. So, but I'm telling you, it looks like they run zero right front spring.
Yeah, that's the big thing, getting it down on the right front and getting the angle, because it's all about you can't, with the IMCA stuff, you're really limited in the amount of angle that you can run in your rear trailing arms. So the more you can get it down on the right front and up on the left rear, gives you more drive angle in that left rear trailing arm and gives you more traction up off. So that definitely that's what they look like. Now, believe it or not, some of them guys are running 800-pound springs. Some of them guys are running 950-pound springs. So
I believe it. I mean, it all comes down to loads and knowing what it takes to not hit the ground.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do there.
But they technically look like they are.
Yeah.
No spring.
Yep.
And they're big into a stiff left front spring.
Yeah, I think
of course,
the asphalt racers call
that in that right rear tire.
Yeah, the asphalt racers call that hillbilly, is when you run spring in the left front than the right front.
Yeah, well, that's what I always used to call it, but nowadays that's the way it is. So whatever it takes. Andrea, on an IMCA A mod, what split on the wheel weights do you like to see in the front? Well, it kind of depends on how much left side weight you have. With a 54% left side weight car, we're right at a 100-pound split between the two front wheels. You know, the rears are usually end up being about 80 pounds a split, and that seems to be pretty normal. We have seen some, if you went higher on left side or lower on left side, that's going to change that amount of split because it's you're measuring how much weight's on the left side of the car.
Yep. And to be honest, like on that, as far as front split, I don't know if I could tell you off the top of my head what my left front would weigh. I know my right front always bounced around from the 435 to 455 range, and my left rear was always right around 680 to 700 range. But like if we were to scale, on my cars, we would always be 0 to 20 pounds of bite, and anymore, the only reason why we ever scale is just to do our lead placement, set our front end. And now anymore, we got strut rods for all four corners, so we could set our front end pretty much anywhere. But I tell these guys that my stuff now we can do everything by a measurement, and we don't really scale anymore. And I've messed a lot with actually messing around lately with scaling the car and dynamic posture and doing some of that type of stuff too. Just don't know what I'm shooting for. It's just to build a notebook of like, all right, this was pretty good. This is where everything was, and set it on the scales. And then Chad's got these 4 load sticks now, setup sticks that are really beneficial for me. A guy that works on different cars a lot, and especially these late models that I got 2 or 3 different cars now that I'm racing a lot. Making a notebook on one car to the next, what could be different. And those are, really beneficial to me to figure out, all right, something's kind of acting up here because this corner is a little heavier than that car or whatever.
So you are finding differences when you put the sticks on car to car, whether the shock mount's just a little bit different or the lead's a couple inches different, or
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much at all, and I've gotten to the point where I set all my 4-link rods, my links, I set them in the load machine because it's within thousands, like I don't do it by a tape measure anymore. Doing all my 4-link rods in the smasher just to make sure that, I'm dead on every single car. Cause I feel like, 100,000 here, 100,000 there is a massive amount.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, but that's what it takes to compete at that late model level is, you touched a little bit on the setup sticks and having that stuff so that you can do your whole front end and fix that stuff fast. And, preparation is obviously key to winning a championship. And you've won a lot of them, and now you're chasing this big one with the World of Outlaws.
Yeah, it's crazy what the late models become. Obviously, it's why it's so tough to even win a race anymore. But I would have liked to race late models 20 years ago. I've been a hell of a lot less stressful, I feel like. But a lot, it's just so difficult. Everything has to be done, like, crossing your T's, dotting your I's on every single little piece. And I do feel like that's where Scott Bloomquist was so much better than everybody is. He was doing this type of stuff, or like very thorough, probably more than anybody else throughout his years. And I think that's why he won so many races.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would bet anything because he was pretty particular.
Yep.
Well, we got time for a few more questions. If anybody's got some time, of course, we can't forget. Got to mention the Harris Clash, June 24th, Boone Speedway. Talked to Johnny Sadoff today, and he was asking me, he says, well, he thought was still at Deer Creek, and I said, no, we moved it to Boone Speedway. And he's, well, I didn't hear that, and I'm like, man, where have you been? I mean, we've been pounding the internet as much as we can, and so we're looking forward to that. It'll be a change of venue. I'm excited about the change. We added stock cars this year. That's another deal. It's going to be different, so it's going to have 3 classes, and looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an exciting event. Brian, Chad, I see that you have new spring cups. For sport mods, would you recommend raising the spring table on the front and rear. We currently have a 6-inch cone style with a rod at the tip on the left rear and a 2.5 on the right rear with the rod at tip.
Trying to get the right print here. So on the rear of that uh, sport mod, when you look at them spring cups, having the right side lower is lower, but it's where so it has the spring is in effect and the screw jack. So the screw jack tip is where you actually measure from the ground to the screw jack tip, but the spring is also in play also. So there's multiple. Like I said, you just got to figure out where you're at, and you explain the really long left rear, which is actually an inch shorter than this one. So this would be an inch longer than that one you have in the car. So I think all the numbers should be on the website, all them different drops, but there is a lot of options there. But getting that spring table right again, we say it every week and we say it multiple times a night, I feel, is getting that right, and having it lower on the right side, I think, is essential.
Well, and with the racing today, all the equipment is usually pretty good. Kind of depends on the people that are running the equipment that do all that little stuff is what makes the difference. And that little stuff makes a big difference when you're competing against some pretty damn good race cars. I mean, you go to Boone Speedway on Saturday night, and there's 10 cars capable of winning that A main easily. Just all depends on how it shakes out. And I mean, it doesn't running 10th. It's not. I mean, it sounds like a bad finish, but in comparison to the competition, it isn't all that bad. Um, Vic said, "Congratulations on your turkey."
Yeah, my new addiction is turkey.
And Joey, would it be better? Anyway, Joey, would it be better to run a stiffer or softer right front spring with not being allowed to preload the left rear slider? What's your opinion on that, Nick?
Trying to find where is that question? Oh, okay. So I always feel like a stiffer spring is going to ride lower. Um, if you got an in number, say I don't even know what type of car this is, but like if your car can travel 4 inches, and you got a 1,200-pound spring in the right front, it's going to ride lower than an 800-pound spring because you have less extended load in that right front. So running down the straightaway and everything, it's going to stay lower down the straightaway because you don't have as much pushing it back up the other way. As far as wheel rate and everything, like it's going to still travel. If your 4-inch number on, Wehrs is on a load machine or on a load stick, depending on which type of car it is. If your 4-inch number is the same, whether it's a 1,200 or 800, that 1,200 is going to ride lower all the way around the racetrack than what the 800 would.
Gotcha.
So if you got no preload in the left rear to help push it up, the stiffer spring is going to fall easier.
Don, USRA modified, killing the frame in the ground on a rough racetrack and was terrible to drive. What's your go-to to fix that? 550 spring, 7 and 5/8 ride height, no bump stop. It's very possible you get too much load in the left rear, which is pushing it on the right front too much. What would you guys' thoughts be?
Also, it comes down to like brake floater. If you got too much on the brake
Right.
floater, it gets more aggressive, starts shoving the right front on the ground even further. I tell people that with a brake floater on that car, if you stab the brake, that thing can overpower about whatever spring you got in the right front. Like it'll just shove that right front right in the ground. So if you can't run a bump stop, yeah, it comes down to just trying to get more load at whatever your max travel would be. So that's the only thing that's going to keep it out of the ground at that point.
You missed Taylor Johnson. If you go back up above Joey, I think IMCA AMOD, stiff pull bar
Oh,
or soft pull
yeah.
bar, less pinion
Yeah.
movement.
IMCA mod, stiff pull bar or soft, less pinion movement or more. On IMCA mod, you know, we tend to like a little bit stiffer pull bar. Less pinion movement seems to be better on that particular tire. Um, we we don't get a lot of movement with that tire because it seems like if you do, it can kind of shock the tire. Um, what's your opinion on that,
Yeah,
Chad?
I think me and Chad are on the same plane as far as that goes too. Like the most grip you would have is damn near solid, but you need some type of compliance.
Yeah.
And so I feel like stiffer is more grip, yes, less pinion and change. But yeah, I mean, you can let him touch on that. I feel like that's kind of my thoughts behind it.
Yeah, definitely that the tire has less grip, so it needs the influence quicker. I would say versus the UMP car that has a lot of horsepower and a lot of grip can travel just a little bit farther because they have forgiveness in other aspects. But definitely, we're traveling the IMCA cars like an inch and a quarter.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like if you get over an inch and a quarter, it's too much on those
Yeah, and
cars.
like on the UMP side, we're seeing anywhere from inch and a half to inch and three quarter on our stuff. I mean, I've seen as much as 3 inches,
Yeah.
but yeah, in a perfect world, that's where I stay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Jesse says, any news on how drivers like the semi-built motor? Um, I don't have a lot of input on that. I know there's a couple guys that have those built motors that are running real strong, and then I know there's a couple guys that seem like they've had a fair amount of motor issues. And I haven't actually dug into, so I can't blame anybody or I can't say the motor's the problem. It's I don't know enough about it to really give you an opinion. But I do know there's one that's a semi-built motor, and man, he is strong. I mean, he's got some serious horsepower in that thing. He's a rookie in the modified division this year. He came out of the sport mod division, and he's been on it. He's been fast every place he's went. And I'm not saying it's just the motor, but I mean, he's definitely got good straightaway speed. Explain to us what moving the chain on the axle towards the inside of the car versus the outside of the car does on the left rear for a sport mod. Well, it'd be the same as it would be on an A mod. When you move it away from the tire, it has less chance to pick the tire up, so it has a little bit more influence. I mean, it has influence on it, but it's not so severe because we can't run any type of rubber mounted deal. It has to be solid. What's your opinion on that, Chad?
Yeah, I'd say that the same as what you just said. Nick can probably touch a little bit on it.
Yeah, I've done some pull down testing with it. Nothing solid ever. It was always had some type of bushing, but yes, I mean the closer you get it to the tire, the more it wants to pull the tire off the ground. But also the closer it gets to the center of the housing, it has more of an effect on the right rear also.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I've always been a guy that I just try and get it closer to the center of the housing. But also, if you're running a bushing on a bushing side, it takes a stiffer bushing or more bushing on the closer you get it to the center of the rear end because you got more leverage for the right rear tire. I mean the left rear tire, sorry, and the left rear four link rod's pulling on it. So on a solid chain, I would say for sure, you just in my world, I would mount as close to the center as I could.
yeah, that makes sense. That's what we've found. It's worked best for us. Uh, we've got just a few more questions here, and then we're going to be done. We're over time, and I don't want to keep Nick.
Oh, you're fine. We could be here all night at this rate.
Um, Chris, what's your thoughts on a 125 16-inch left rear spring on an IMCA stock car or even a 100 16-inch left rear spring? Well, keep in mind, you're still dealing with a 2,900 pound car. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. That 100-pound spring probably not going to last long. Don't know if it might be a deal where it's so soft that it's not going to have uh, enough to actually affect the car like you think it would if it was a 2,500-pound car. Um, the biggest thing that I found, 125 seems about the softest that we have run on the stock cars. Like I said, just because the actual weight of them themselves. But definitely, if you're going to go soft like that, definitely go with that 16-inch spring. Otherwise, your spring table will really be messed up. Um, Mike, Nick, right rear load on a late model. What do you like changing tacky to slick? How much load is too little? Sometimes we get down to 300 pounds static to help steer in.
Yeah. Say like on a Longhorn car, if you look at their standard setup sheet, it'd be 450 to 500 would be kind of standard to start the night. And then you could see as low as, I've seen guys as low as 350, but typically throughout a night, I wouldn't change a 100-pound swing in kind of anything I race. But um, it really, so much of that depends on what kind of car you got and everything else of what they call for. Because I have drove late models before where you'll get down to 300 pounds of right rear load, but right rear load wise, we look at our ride height number, obviously, and then we'll look at a 1-inch number, an inch and a half number, and a 2 inches of travel. And that, inch and a half to 2 inches of travel is typically your entry, and changing that throughout the night is, what affects how the car, gets in the corner. So typically guys, when the track gets slicker and need more right rear stick getting in the corner, they put a spring rubber in or whatever to, help stick the right rear.
AJ, how much angle do you want on the right rear trailing arm on a stock car? Dry slick and heavy racetrack. Well, believe it or not, a lot of times what happens is people try to take less angle out of it, which keep in mind now, we start with less angle, or say we start flat, and the car rolls. What's the angle going to go to? It's going to go to a negative angle. Well, the problem you run into is sometimes it steers so tight that now all of a sudden the car gets throttle tight in the middle of the corner just because the steer's not enough. And with the angle in the right rear, it's kind of like Nick, earlier we were talking about a four-link car that was lifting the left front and said raise the right upper angle on, or right upper bar on, and put more angle in the right upper bar. Well, it's the same thing with this stock car. Putting a little bit more angle in it so that it doesn't go negative is definitely going to help the car drive through the corner better. It's going to keep some traction in that right rear tire and help the car just steer through the middle of the corner better, rotate better. Don said thank you. Shane, this is our last question. Shane, what kind of bite numbers would you consider the best range to be in a triangulated four-link stock car? At what point of bite preload do you think the car starts to lose its balance? Um, how much left rear preload is too much when the racetrack slicks off? Is that the same question?
It is.
Yeah.
And you're speaking Chinese to me because I don't know nothing about IMCA stock cars, but yeah, Chad's going to have to take that one.
Yeah, that one's a tough one.
I really don't know what they run for loads and things. That's you, Bob.
Give us something better. Give us something else.
Yeah, in a four-lane triangulated stock car, what point of bite? As far as preload goes, they still, we still preload the left rear spring, in that 1 inch to an inch and a half, same as you would on pretty much everything else. Actual weight, like on scales wise, those guys tend to run still, somewhere in that 80 to 100 pounds. Some guys will get real heavy on that left rear, but then that makes the car really loose getting in. And those cars have a tendency to be loose getting in the way it is. So, the more balanced the car can be, the better the car is going to drive. And, if you can equally load both tires, you're going to make use of both tires and go forward better than you would trying to over overdo the left rear. Paul, with front ride heights set, stock car center to center measurements and notes. At this point, can I go right into the load stick and get my loads set to where I want them? And at ride height will vary after setting load numbers correctly. Um,
Yeah, once your car is all centered, all scaled up, and you have your center to center measurements, that's when you get the load stick out, and you'll put the load stick at that ride height number and get the load number off the stick, and you'll document that. In the rear of a stock car or a sport mod, you can take a setup stick on the opposite side, and then set that number to that center to center, and have the stick in the left rear and the load stick in the right rear, and build a notebook off that too. So once you get the car scaled, then you take the stick and get your static numbers, and then once you go to the speedway, then you can do some paint your shafts with a Sharpie and get some down numbers, and then you can push the car down, get that center to center, and then you use the load stick to get your dynamic stuff. So, but it all starts with your scaled center to centers.
Yeah, and on my modifieds, that's how we originated our numbers was scaling a car, and you look for these numbers, and then Chad comes out with this load stick at this time, and it's like, oh shit, now we gotta build a whole nother notebook, and we pulled those center to centers. Then at that point, say it was probably, I don't even know when we started doing this, 2017.
Probably.
Right around then. So at that point, we really didn't even have our front shock mounts jigged at that point. It was just kind of like an angle, and we just weld that thing on. But now it's got to be super precise to make sure that our load numbers stay the same on every single car. And so yeah, we just in my world on the modifieds, I check my left front into center to center, and then a 1 inch of travel is all I really ever check. I'll check of 1 inch up and 1 inch down in the left front. And then on my right fronts, we go from ride height. Our cars will travel 4 inches before they hit the ground. IMCA stuff, probably not quite as much. Just if you're running stock lowers, it's probably not going to travel that much. And
you're about 3.25, 3.5 inches.
Yeah, and like our right front shock is mounted behind the A-frame versus you guys are all in the center. So we travel 4 inches. So I document every single number from my ride height all the way to my 4 inches, and play with that of changing those numbers. Like I said before, of like if you run a stiffer rate spring, your 1 and 2 inch number of travel is going to be softer on that stiffer rate spring because you don't have it wound up as much. And that's what goes back to me saying that it typically rides lower, is because it doesn't take as much number at the top end at your ride height number in order to get your bottom end.
We got two more, and this Cody's. I like this question. Nick, do you dabble with the clocking the left rear bird cage? If so, do you only do it certain track conditions? And as a driver, what do you get? What do you do to get it back normal to make sure that the car would make ride heights?
Yeah, so that's a big question now that Casey Dillard won the 100,000 last year, and his stuff was cammed over and never came back, and all that. So now it's kind of opened up a bag of worms for everybody. That's what they think they have to have, and all my personal modifieds, they've always been zero index. So I felt like one of the first guys to really work on that on the modified side, and kind of got it where it was pretty good, and then. There is a picture floating around of my car at Highland. I think that was 3 years ago at a Summer Nationals race where mine did the same thing that Kay's did, where I ended up getting hit in the left rear. It broke the left rear shock and spring, ended up flopping the bird cage over. and I raced it the rest of the race and was able to win. And when I rolled up to victory lane, I left rears cammed over and never came back. But yeah, if the track has any kind of rough to it, it's awful because
I
it's
bet.
pitching. So yeah, I mean, I feel like yes, you can make it good. Is it going to beat standard? Every single time? No. It's not like something that you have to have. But yeah, if there's any kind of chop to the racetrack, it's terrible.
All right, last question, Jamie. Should stock cars be scaled with or without the driver? It all depends on how your numbers are. I always use everything with the driver because that's how the car is going to actually run. So I always recommend with the driver.
I don't
Well,
care.
thanks, Nick. We appreciate you coming on and spending the evening with us. This is a real honor, and I've sure enjoyed it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I do it whenever you ask. I appreciate it.
Be careful what you say there.
Yeah. You got plenty of other pretty good guests to dabble into. So I appreciate you having me on. And Chad's done a lot for me throughout my career, and it's a pleasure to get to work with you for the first time and meet you. So hopefully we cross paths at some point, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Well, sounds great. Well, you guys have a good evening, and thanks again. Thanks, Chad. And we will be back here in 2 weeks, which would be just a second here, which would be the 12th, May 12th.
All right.
So,
Good night, everybody. Thanks.
Happy birthday a day early, a couple days early there, Nick.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.